I'm David Hunt and welcome to The Art Hunter. My guest today, oh no, hold on, we won't talk about him just yet. Let's go back in time. Let's go back to the 1700s, and I'm talking about Joseph Banks, who came out to Australia with Captain Cook. And why did he come? We all know why he came. He was the botanist to actually capture the amazing flowers and grasses and all that from this strange country to the other side of the world. The guy that I've got in today, that's what he does. He paints beautiful watercolours and other bits and pieces, we'll get to it. But then he also does this stuff behind me, which is very different to his botanical art. I am absolutely thrilled today. Award winner, known around the world for his extraordinary art. He teaches, who's doing it on Zoom right now because we're in this pandemic, but he often travels to countries around the world, full classes, because why wouldn't you? The Prince of Wales is even aware of his work and has even got a piece, but we'll get to that a little bit later. I'm gonna mess his name up because it's one of those names. His name is John Pastoriza-Piñol. Is that all right?
That is
good?
Perfect, yes.
John, hello.
Hi, how you going?
Good. I've always admired your work, as you know,
yes,
and I've chatted to you many times over the years. Where did it all start? Because what you're doing with the botanical art is so unique and so beautiful that it must be so time-consuming, and the pleasure you must get from the painting. When did it start from you?
For me, I was always a gardener, so I loved to potter around in the garden. And what I was really intrigued with is these really unusual rare flowers and plants. The problem is that a lot of these plants only flower for maybe about 1 or 2 weeks of the year.
Yeah.
And then you have to wait another year for them to appear. And I thought there must be a really easier way to try and capture them, not like with photography. Photography doesn't quite get those nuances.
Oh, a lot of photographers won't like to hear that.
Oh, well, no, we find that, when you take, as a hobby artist, taking a photo of a flower or a plant doesn't quite capture what you want.
Yep.
And so I remember one morning, Mum woke me up. This is when I was probably a teenager, and she said, get in the car, we're going off to the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne. There's a woman who's just finished painting a whole lot of Banksias. And this, of course, was Celia Rossa, and she was, of course, presenting her second volume of the genus Banksia. And I was probably about maybe 13 or 14 at the time.
Yeah.
And I saw this stuff, I thought, I want to do this.
Wow.
Loved it. It was just this incredible attention to detail, but you could capture more than what a photograph could. And I thought, this is what I want to do. The parents go, oh, not another hobby. So they ended up giving me some paints and some brushes and paper, and off I went. And I wanted to do art in my last few years of school, and my parents said, you're not becoming a starving artist in a garret. You have to do sciences because you're going to university. So I put that on the back burner.
Yep.
But by the time I was starting my PhD, I was positioned over in northwest Spain.
Excuse me.
I know.
But then your surname is...
Yes, Spanish. So I had family in that same province, so they were literally about a 2-hour train ride away, so it was great for me.
Yep.
But I was investigating the effect of the Tasmanian blue gum on the agro-ecosystems in northwest Spain.
Yeah.
So bizarre. But it was there I had a little bit more time to look and paint the natural plants.
Oh, so in other words, you were skipping going to uni and spending time in fields painting. Was that what you were doing? What's your mother's number?
No. I was doing my PhD. I was doing my studies. But I didn't have a television. And so in the evening, I would actually use that time to paint.
Yep.
The location of the campus where I was studying was way outside the city. And it was close to a lot of like national parks. And the things I saw there were things I would try to grow back home. Incredible rare plants that you just don't see anywhere else in the world. And the flora and fauna of that part of Spain is so unique, and it's more akin to what you'd find in France and Russia.
Okay.
Yeah, so really weird.
Yeah.
So everyone thinks, Spain's this hot climate, tropical plants. No.
But it does snow there, though,
it
doesn't
does,
it?
Yeah. I experienced snow. So, so during that time, I ended up painting a few plants. One of them was a terrestrial orchid. It's called a tongue orchid, and I painted it and I sent it back home, and a friend of Mum's saw it and said, I think you should look at doing this seriously when you came back from studies. So came back from overseas, was trying to get a job in science. I was in the situation that I was overqualified and underexperienced.
Oh no, don't you hate that?
And a lot of the jobs that I was applying for were remotely located, so I would have to literally pack up shop and move out into rural areas. So in the meantime,
such a city boy too, aren't
such a city boy, yep. So in the meantime, I started learning with one of Australia's renowned botanic artists, which is Jenny Phillips, and she has a school of botanical art. And I started there, and I was really proud of what I had provided in terms of my portfolio.
Yeah.
And I went into a class, and I realised that I knew nothing. And so
Were you shattered?
No, it was kind of, it was a really good turning point for me to realise that there was more that I could explore.
Yep.
So I went into remedial.
Yep.
And then within probably about 3 months of being in those classes, I had produced some work. We had a group show at the end of the year, and I sold everything. So it was like going, okay, so there is something there.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much where it started, and then it took off.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what about working? So you have to have a full-time job to get by on.
Yeah.
So how hard is it, being an artist, to have to juggle with a full-time job and concentrating on the art? Do you actually find that you don't follow through some things, or are you still so passionate about what you're doing?
It's a really interesting position to be in. I currently still work as a professional staff member at one of the universities in Melbourne, at RMIT, and I find there's a lot of other creatives in the professional staff pool. And they've come to the same conclusion that I have, is that you need to have another job in order to have a career in the creative arts.
And your parents were right.
They were, yes. So
it's like you
need a degree. But there's interesting times when I'm at work and I would prefer to be in front of the canvas, as you would say. But there's times that sometimes I'll be wanting to start to paint and the mood isn't there. I prefer to be at work.
Right.
So we say to people, creativity can't be turned on and off like a tap. You need to get yourself into the right headspace, I think, in order to create. So it makes it hard, especially if you're trying to juggle to create work and also have to go to work 5 days a week.
So how did it? You became world famous. You're known very well in England and in America. How did that happen? Because it must have been a long process, was it? It didn't happen overnight.
It doesn't happen overnight, no. But what I started to do was I started to go to a lot of galleries, and I'd be looking at the work of a lot of contemporary artists, and I would go up to the gallery owner or the gallery manager and say, this is what I do. And there'd be a little bit of cultural cringe associated with it, like, we're not really interested in what you do, or that's really nice as a hobby. So I thought, how do I take this to the next level? So I spoke to some of my colleagues who have had the ability to show overseas, and one of the best places to start is at the Royal Horticultural Society in London.
But tough, wouldn't it?
Tough
to break into?
Yeah. So how it operates is that they have these shows during the winter months, and it's a great experience. London is cold and miserable, but in the heart of it, they have these experiences where you can see all these amazing winter flowers, and you can actually see art on display. And so a lot of people come from all around the UK and descend in London for for that kind of like 2-week period.
Yep.
And it's great because this is where you can see your artwork and see how it fits into other artists from all around the world.
Yep.
So you submit a portfolio for like a prerequisite, and if you are successful, you are given a certain amount of space. It could be 3 foot, 6 foot, or 9 foot of space. So, and with that, you are given a brief. You have to create 8 works of a certain plant or a genus, and then you put them up for critique.
Yep.
And so the first time I did that, my luggage got lost. I arrived, my luggage didn't, and all my art wasn't in my carry-on, it was in my check-in luggage.
Yeah.
And I thought, what do I do? Because, the next day I had to install.
Yeah.
And, I had saved up all this money to come over to do it, and I thought, this is just really bad. Anyway, my luggage did arrive. I was able to get my installation up literally an hour before judging, so that was stressful. But it was great. And what happens, you're able to be awarded medals, a bit like the Chelsea Flower Show.
Yep.
Same situation.
Yep.
So they have award medals from gold, silver, gilt, silver and bronze. And what happens is that you then get a critique, but you're also able to sell your artwork at the same time. And it was a really good time. So this is like the early 2000s. And I thought, I'm going to give it a go. So I went over. I got a silver medal on my first go. Brilliant. I was rapt about that.
Yep.
But I actually sold 9 of the 12 works I put on display.
Fantastic.
And it was like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And so what then happened was that from that experience, I was then invited to put work into the Hunt Institute in Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, which is a prestigious library, and it literally is the most comprehensive collection of historic and botanical art around the world.
Whoa. And that was because of this?
That was because of this.
Fantastic.
And I went, this is awesome. So that was really great. And then the next time I went, which was the following year, I did another body of work and I got a gold medal.
Oh, right.
Which was great.
Come on.
And I went, this is what's going to happen now. I'm on a roll.
Yep.
And it was then I thought, I'm going to have a solo exhibition. And
excuse me.
Yeah.
You're like, gold medal, here I go.
I was really cocky, So I thought, this is great. I'm going to try and see if I can find a venue in London. And so I found a gallery.
Yep.
And they were really intrigued. They really liked it. And they said, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And they said, we'll coincide it with the Chelsea Flower Show. We get a lot of foot traffic.
Of course.
And it's a perfect coinciding event with Chelsea.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer. So I decided to have my first ever show in the UK. And everyone said, why aren't you doing it here in Australia? And I said, again, that cultural cringe element. I needed to have some sort of
credentials
in order to get acknowledged back here. So that went really well. Great help from Austrade. They had some fantastic grant opportunities, so that was brilliant. The show went extremely well, and it attracted someone from Prince Charles's office.
Whoa.
So at that stage, Prince Charles was working on his first ever Royal Florilegium of the plants growing at Highgrove. So we all know Highgrove is his country manor, and he's really passionate about permaculture and a whole lot of sustainability. And so he wanted to document the plants growing there in this Royal Florilegium. And someone had then taken a catalogue to the powers that be, and of course, next thing you know, through the mail, I get this letter, and it had all the plumes on it. And I thought, this must be the British tax system asking for the VAT. And it turned out to be an invitation to participate, and I just went, this is incredible. So that was great. And then, things just started moving from there. So,
is it? Do you think that it's such a specialist area that it's a little bit easier to worm your way in?
It's really funny. The Brits say that you can, if you cross the road, you could walk past 10 or 15 artists who would work in a botanical mode. So it's very much an institution over there.
Okay.
Whereas here, it's starting to go through a renaissance. A lot of people are coming to it as like, hey, this is an art form I really admire, but I'd like to know the secrets behind it, because it seems to be almost difficult to unpack. How did the artist create something so intricate with a medium that is so loose? So everything, of course, we work with is watercolour.
Yeah.
But we use it in so many different types of consistency to get different effects.
How long, John, does an average painting take you? Because you're not doing it full time as well.
No.
So you're working all day long and socialising as well. And then, what, a day or 2 days?
Oh, more. So it really depends on the subject.
Yep.
And like, for example, subject matter that is going to be exceptionally ephemeral and literally change overnight, it's really important to try and find replacements just in case things go a bit haywire.
Yeah.
If you have an object that isn't going to change much, something that's already like a cone or a seed pod, something that's already desiccated and it's not going to change that much, you can continue on the painting process that way.
An orchid would be good though, wouldn't it?
Orchids,
because you do a fair few orchids.
I do a lot of orchids. The thing with the orchids, the flower has to be done first, and then you move on to the foliage.
Okay.
So with more complicated compositions, you have to compartmentalise what you want to achieve first, and then move through that one.
John, do you ever take photos of it?
Photos, photos are your last resort. I tend not to. I think you can get a lot more from the actual object than you can from a photograph. I find that with the human eye, we have a greater way of discerning certain differences and nuances in colour and hue and chroma, whereas with a photograph, you're pretty much relying on the CMYK variation, and it depends on how fine the print is. So,
and what about the storage of it? Do you in the fridge? Is that what you do? Or?
At some stages, I have my dining table, and it almost looks like a compost heap because I have everything on it, and it's when people go, oh, can I come around? It's like, oh God, everything's got to go under the bed. So,
well, can't you say it's an installation?
An installation. It looks like an installation. It looks like Miss Havisham's dinner table. It's just it's really gross. But there are, I think there are stages where you can put things away. For example, I think one of the works behind me, I worked on that for over 5 years. And the reason why it took so long is that I didn't feel like I had the skill set in order to complete it when I started.
Okay.
And I say that to my students all the time. If you feel that you don't have the skills, don't abandon the work, just put it away and then come back to it after a while and then see how you go.
It must be very rewarding, like away for 5 years and then you finish it and go, it was worth it.
Yeah, and there's almost this sense of immediacy sometimes leading up to an exhibition or to a show. You think, well, I've got to have something available. If I finish this, I'll have it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the groundwork has been done. But it's hard. You want to finish something, but it's in many ways you can fall in and out of love with a subject.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You may lose interest. Something else might take
look, a butterfly.
I know. It's like, oh wow, that's even better. So I usually work about anywhere between 8 or 9 works at a time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that ability for me to separate from each work is important as well. You can go blind. And people go, what do you mean you go blind? Blind is when you stop looking.
Yeah.
And it's like an autopilot. And I tried to explain that to someone the other day. I said, it's like this bias. It's this thing that takes over. I said, have you ever been in the car, you're driving and your mind wanders, the next thing you know, you're in the car, you're in your driveway. I said, because you've gone onto autopilot. And the same thing happens in the painting process as well.
Or like you leave something on a table and you walk past it 20 times and it's the next day that you think, hold on, I thought I didn't take that out of the room and I haven't noticed it.
Yeah.
What I also love, and it's what Banks used to do as well, and it's gone through the years, is that the roots, I love it when you actually have the beautiful plant of the stem and then the roots. I find that, I don't know what I find fascinating about it.
That's more of a compositional element.
Okay, that's what you call it, composition.
I look at a lot of other people's work as reference. We talk about silent practice a lot. That's when you get to look at either a painting or a plant growing in situ, and you just start to understand its structure and how it grows. And I always say that sometimes the magic happens below the soil. And most people don't ever investigate that. So wherever possible, by having the whole entity on show, gives a better context to show how this thing is nourished, how it grows, and you know, how beautiful what we don't see is, as well as what we do see.
Now, you mentioned about the teaching.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy teaching? What's the you know, or is it frustrating because you think, so I could do better than that, I could touch that up for them, and you know, like, how do you approach the teaching?
So with teaching, the way I approach teaching is that I try and put myself into my students' situation and go, what do they want to learn? Because I was a student as well, and there were things that I always wanted to learn, all the secret, you know, tricks, the tips, everything like that.
Yep.
And I always try, where possible, is I take my students from literally to 0 all the way to 100 for whichever subject we're working on. And it's very much a gradual process. And I always tell my students that this is part of what we call the slow art movement. It's not immediate.
Yep.
It's not like a quick flick of the brush and you've got this amazing image. It really is a deliberate application of paint at certain stages in order to get a different type of end product.
So therefore, in a class, say there's you know, a dozen people in the class. They and pretty much you're supposed to. They all should look the same, shouldn't they?
They have their own. They have their own nuances. I get my students to draw their own specimens. So drawing is always first and foremost. And I always say that if your drawing is bad, your painting won't improve. So
it's me. I'm a terrible drawer.
And with drawing, I've started to utilise a lot of geometric tools, and they help people understand how shape can help identify how to transfer a three-dimensional object onto a two-dimensional surface.
Oh, okay.
And that's the hard thing, is that when you think about the easiest ways to draw things, it's pretty much front on, side on, or top down. It's when you start moving them in space, that's where it gets a little bit trickier. So I have all these different types of tools to help people understand how they can start to see how shape can help improve the way that they can draw an object in front of them.
And you enjoy teaching?
Love it. Yep.
Excellent.
One thing that I really am so fascinated in is the way that I teach certain groups and what they learn and how they interpret what I teach is so different. The classes when I teach over in America, it's really interesting because a lot of them don't have this type of exposure. Whereas here in Australia, a lot of the people have learnt from other of my colleagues. So they have some understanding and prior knowledge. And they just love to take it to that next level.
Now, gallery. You know, like all of a sudden you've got to sell it. You know, at the end of the day, it's the love of painting. But how hard is it to? Well, it would be a little bit easy for you now with the prizes you've won and your exposure around the world. You know, like, have you got a gallery that represents you?
Yes, so I'm represented by Scott Libsey Galleries.
Where's that?
They're in Armidale here in Victoria. So they've recently moved. They had a larger space. They've slightly downsized the gallery space, but the space that they've occupied now is a fantastic venue, and I think it has a better contextualisation for people to understand how art could fit into a home rather than a warehouse or a larger type of environment there.
You would have to have a very special relationship with the gallery owner, because they're representing you, and it's the only person that's really representing you, aren't they?
Yes.
For sale. So, you know, like, how did it come about? You know, like, because you were with somebody else before and
That's
they
right.
retired. Who were you
So
with?
I was with Nellie Caston Gallery, and she was fantastic. She really loved what I was able to provide and present, and we did very well. She retired.
How did that affect you, John?
It was interesting because a lot of the other artists in the stable were able to find a home relatively easy. I was a really unique type of client, or type of I guess artist, because my work is seen as quite traditional, and it's works on paper.
Yep.
And so my aim was to try and find a gallerist who knew about how to sell works on paper, but also that I would fit into a stable where I'm not competing with an existing artist who did similar work.
Thing, right?
That's right. So I met with Scott Livesey a couple of times, and it was actually through Nellie and through her endorsement that he came to my studio to have a look, and he really enjoyed what he saw, and so I had my show with him in 2017. But he said, listen, the way that this works is that we will probably need you to get an arts grant to make this happen.
Okay.
So this is going to be another type of litmus test. So it's almost kind of like a way to go through. That year, I think it was 2016, I didn't end up with one arts grant. I ended up with 4.
Whoa.
And one of them, of course, being an Australian Arts Council grant that took me to have a residency in New York for 3 months. So there was no hesitation in his mind that we could go ahead with this. And the project was looking at the work of Irving Penn and his flower photography. And I got some amazing letters of endorsement from the Art Institute of Chicago, as well as Pace McGill Gallery in New York, which is like really high end. And so that was a really good endorsement.
Okay.
And so, it was, we ended up having the show. I asked if I could paint the gallery. He was in shock. He was like going, what do you mean you're going to paint the gallery? So I ended up painting the whole gallery like a sky blue.
So like the NGV does for their big exhibition. So oh wow, good on you.
And it was only after that a lot of the other artists who had been showing with Scott had said, thank you for doing it, because we've been trying to get him to do this forever. But I just wanted people to have a different experience going into a gallery that they're familiar with. And that's something that's really important, is that it has to be this experiential type of process. People want to be able to be entertained to a certain degree and have another experience.
Instead of that plain white.
Instead of the plain white.
No, I agree with you. Good on you.
So the show went really well, and as a result, I'm now part of his represented stable of artists, which is great. And so I still, when I have work available, we show it through the gallery, whether it be like a group show or individual solo shows. Any works that don't get sold, they are in the stockroom, and people can make inquiries. But on the odd occasion, I might then decide to pull some of those works to show either regionally or overseas.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a question. Did he make you paint it back white after the exhibition?
So I did get sponsorship from Dulux. They provided us with the original colour, and we also got the colour to paint it back. But we didn't. We kept it for about another 3 months, and then he decided to turn the gallery black.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the other artists said, hey, I'd love it if this was a black gallery.
Fantastic.
And it worked really well.
So you didn't have to paint?
I didn't have to paint it back, but I did provide him with the paint, so
Fantastic.
That was good.
Good on you. Now, all of a sudden, here you are, you're being represented by a gallery, and the paintings are on the wall. Framing. How important is the framing to a painting?
Yeah. we say framing can make or break a work, and in some cases, a lot of artists, when they're presenting their work, they don't have their work framed, whether it is a work on paper which is pinned to the wall, or if it's a canvas and it's just the raw canvas on the wall. Framing can be tricky because you might have a client who wants to frame it a certain way. So the easiest way to produce or present your work is in a very neutral way. So if people want to change the frame, they can. But the framing, I think, for my work is really important.
You were actually saying that you were at the Framers this morning.
Yeah.
And there were, like you spent a few hours there and you walked away and the framer said, let me look out the back and see what I can find and come back.
That's right.
That was for one painting?
One work, yeah. So it was an unusual work, but it was to follow a brief for a show that we're doing later this year. But it was really tricky because everything that we tried would suffocate the work. And you need to find that right balance.
Yeah, and it's so delicate what you do that you have to, it can't be overpowering, can it?
It can't detract, So hopefully he'll come back with some suggestions. But we were trying everything, and it just didn't happen. When something's working, it's this aha moment. Yep. Everything we tried, unfortunately didn't work.
But he'll find something.
Yeah,
because you use the same framework.
Yes.
All right, now we're moving. Your beautiful, botanical artwork. Over my shoulder is a whole new ball game.
Yes. Yeah.
This came about a couple of years ago.
Did, yes.
You're into the leather scene here in Melbourne and probably around the world. And that's when I first met you at a party, and you arrived in leather. Yeah. Very bold move, moving away from botanical work to leather work. Yeah. What did your gallery say, and how was it received?
So I'm kind of like going through my Robert Mapplethorpe kind of like phase at the moment.
Although I don't see any of the phallic flowers.
You might have to look a bit closely. It's definitely there. But so I was propositioned. It sounds a bit interesting. I was propositioned.
Well, that sounds promising, doesn't it?
Someone had said, listen, the detail that you give to a botanical work, what would it look like if you did it, if you had a different subject matter, like leather? And they said, I reckon you'd do a really good job at it. And I never thought that would be something that I'd be interested in. And every year they have a men-on-men art competition at the Laird, which is the home of our leather tribe.
It's a men-only hotel.
That's correct, yes. And they do this art competition. And
I often judge it.
Yes, And the wonderful thing about this is it's open to anyone who wants to submit work. So people who are very good at art, or people who go, I want to have a go at doing something that is, it's something that's inspired me to produce. And so it's great to see these people that you see every so often show their creativity. And so I thought, I'll give it a go. And so I put together a work. And
just one piece?
One piece. It was one piece. And I submitted that for the exhibition. And of course, it won. I didn't think it would win, but it won, which was great.
Come on.
No, it was because it wasn't my usual work.
And you use your name?
I did, yes.
Right, okay.
The thing that was different about this was that I treated the leather work the same way I would treat a flower, but where my flowers are starting to borderline being either ionic or phallic, I wanted the leather work to look more like a flower and less highly sexualized.
It's kind of like... I'm not sure where you're going here.
So I'm flipping the dialogue.
Right.
So my flower works have these really strong sexual overtones to them. They're very, very subtle, but they are there.
Okay.
So what I wanted to do with the leather work is I wanted to, instead of make it overtly sexual, make it more like a botanical work. So the trick I wanted to do with the leather is I didn't want to use black. Black is a really difficult pigment to work with because it's just so flat. So I developed a technique that all of these works behind you are made with primary colours. There's not one bit of black in it at all. And so it was a technique that I had developed. And after the show, it didn't sell, but the work came back and I showed it to my gallerist. He was away up in Sydney for another art event, but he came back and he rang me immediately, said, I thought this was a Tom of Finland work. And he goes, let's chat, this is really exciting.
Okay.
So I then put that work into an art prize, which was the Splash Contemporary Art Prize, works on paper over at McClellan Sculpture Park. It was actually picked up as a finalist, which was great. Again, completely different to any other type of painting in the exhibition. So I started to see that this is actually getting a lot more interest in a lot of curated shows and museums and things like that. So I said, listen, I'd love to put together a small body of work. As part of the prize with the Men on Men, you get a chance to do an exhibition.
That's right.
And that's usually at the start of the year. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do a series of leather works. And so I had them done, and I also incorporated some of my floral pieces. So when people came to have a look at the show, they could see the breadth and depth of what I could achieve.
Yeah, and did you do that through your gallery or did you do it at the Laird?
It was just done at the Laird,
right.
Yep. Afterwards, I wanted then to extrapolate that theme further, and that's when I said to Scott, I want to do a show. And he goes, perfect. So we did a show with 2 other artists, and they had a very similar theme, either female nudes or female rope bondage, done in pen and ink. And these works would fitted really neatly into that, but we wanted it to coincide with AWOL, which is the August Week of Leather. So we really wanted to try and build it up. But the other thing that was really important is that it was leading up to the 100th anniversary of the birth of Tom of Finland. And so they were going.
And for those that don't know who he is,
yeah, so
just explain.
Yeah, Tom of Finland was quite a famous artist. He would do a lot of hyper sexualized images of men in various
forms of leather.
Forms of leather or uniform.
Or tight, very, very tight
Very,
jeans.
very tight, very, very overly sexualized.
Yep.
But they were all rendered in graphite, pen and ink, and in some cases watercolour.
And became very famous.
Became very, very famous. And there is now the Tom of Finland Foundation based in, I think in LA. I think it's in LA. And there's also the Leather Archives and Museum in Chicago, which also has quite an amount of his original work. So it's very hard to get an original work now. They're quite expensive.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
So we're starting to see his work is now becoming more and more acceptable.
Yep.
At the time, it was considered to be quite lewd and pornographic.
But I think society's moved on so much.
Society has moved on. And so what I wanted to do was to have that nod to him and also have the nod to Robert Mapplethorpe as well, because he would jump between natural history and also the queer scene in New York and other parts of America. So it's really interesting to see that little dialogue play out.
And how did it go? How did the exhibition?
Went really well. Really well. So the show was called Sobriquet, and it was really utilising that sense of anonymity people have when they dress in uniform, especially in this scene, is that they're all considered to be leather men, but they all have their own identities.
Yep.
So yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, here we are. You're pretty much at the top of the tree in what you do. Where do you see yourself in 3-5 years' time? Can you see yourself becoming more professional? Maybe give up the day job, or I shouldn't say that, just in case the boss is listening, and working as a full-time artist. Would you like that?
I really enjoyed that separation from my art. And having that distraction of having a day job. What it does is it doesn't allow me to procrastinate. I find that if I don't have that pressure, I won't do anything.
Yeah.
So having limited time is really giving me more of an impetus to create work.
Yep.
It'd be nice to see how I might be able to decouple a little bit from my day-to-day tasks and then focus more on art. But yeah, it's changing. The way that, you know, we're being employed at the moment is obviously going to change in the next 5 to 10 years. So I'll probably find myself more in the educational side of art, teaching technique, but I still would like to keep up with the exhibition scene, definitely.
So what's your PhD in?
Chemical ecology.
Right.
Yeah, which is part of a stream of botany. So it looks at plant warfare. So plant warfare. So plants, because they're stoic organisms, they can't move. So where they grow, they have to try and maximise their footprint. And if they have to compete for resources, either being light, water or nutrient, how can they defend themselves? And they can do that through the release of chemicals through the soil or through the leaf litter and things like that.
So they're fighting off.
They're fighting, yeah.
Wow, fascinating.
They're not as immobile as what we think they are.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
John, always an absolute pleasure chatting to you. And do you know what? Congratulations on an absolutely brilliant career as an artist and as a nice person as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm David Hunt and I'm the Art Hunter, and we'll see you again real soon.